Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, viewers and friends of Iqra TV. Welcome to another edition of Real Talk. I'm your host Iqbal Bana. Every week I try and bring some interesting topics for you to share with you, people who have knowledge and expertise around some of these fundamental issues that affect our community on a day-to-day basis. Last week we talked about something that was very important to many people around hate crime. And before that, we talked about mental health within our community and what sort of issues are facing not just the individuals, but how institutions are responding to that as well. Today, I have, and I say this every week, I have an eminent guest, but today I really have somebody who I think can make a huge difference to our lives on a day-to-day basis. Because the subject we want to talk about is the elderly care. People who are getting old, who may, and sometimes not even old, somebody who may end up in a situation where they cannot look after themselves or don't have the capacity to make decisions for themselves. And I'll explain to you why I've asked him to come and join me. My mother, about 4 years ago, suffered a really bad stroke and became completely disabled. And when she became disabled, she needed carers. And at that time, what happened was the local authority provided the opportunity for the carers to come in, but they said that because she had a property in her name, she would have to pay care charges, which sometimes can amount to phenomenal amounts of money on an annual basis. You know, in my mom's situation, we managed to avoid that for a little while. But virtually in our community, most people like to own their own homes. And what we don't realize is, it's khuda na kare, but if you end up in a situation where you either go into a care home or you need carers coming in and you have assets, then the likelihood is that those assets would be what they call deferred payments. The local authority would take control of those assets, and at the end of your care requirement, they may take the property away. So a lot of people buy properties in the hope that they will give them to their children as a part of the inheritance. But this issue is, has a huge problem, in my opinion, that our community needs to address. Alongside that, there's issues about living LPAs, living a power of attorney, which if you became ill, who do you want to make decisions for you if you can't make those decisions? We've had a number of cases where people have become ill, suddenly, and then they find themselves in a hospital situation, in a situation where fundamental decisions about them need to be made. And who has the power to make those decisions? You would think that the spouse may have the power, but recent case examples suggest that unless it's written down in writing that tells who the actual power rests with, that cannot necessarily be applied. So these are some of the issues I want to cover with my very special guest today. It's the first time he's come here, and I'm really, really deeply honored and grateful to him for coming here. He's Asif Abubaker from Kingswell Watts in Dewsbury. Asif, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for giving your time and coming here. In the introduction, I talked about a number of issues. Yeah. And as I said, my mum, may Allah bless her, she passed away last year. We had this dilemma ourselves, and I'm sure there'll be other families, I hope they don't go through the same, but could possibly go through the same. Yeah. What are the issues around care cost, and how can people sort of negate some of these things around that?
Alas, it is something that happens a lot in the Asian community and the Muslim community, and one of the key things that you have to understand is that everybody that has income and capital is subject to this charge. So if parents are not looked after by their children, or they can't be looked after by their children, then what has to happen is that their capital and their income has to be assessed. Now there are capital and income limits. Let's look at the capital, because that's what you've raised at this moment in time. The capital amount is 23,250. So right. Anything that you have over and above 23,250 pounds is considered to be wealth that can be used for your own care. Right. Okay.
So if you got more than 23,200 pounds in your bank account or liquid assets, then that's considered to be, you have sufficient money.
That's correct. Right. That income, that capital amount is actually going up in 2025 on the 1st of October, I believe. That's if obviously the present government is still in power and that gets enforced. you will find that the limit will go up to £100,000.
Oh, wow.
But at this moment in time, it's still 23,250.
There was some suggestion about £86,000, but it never made into law, was it?
It is still, the 86,000 limit is there as well. Let me explain to you, because there's a £14,000 lower limit as well.
Oh, right.
Okay, and the 14,000 lower limit is where you, between 14,250 and 23,250, you have to contribute a small amount towards,
right.
We say small amount, it's still a significant amount. After 14,250, you don't, any capital that you have thereafter, you are entitled to keep that.
Right.
Okay. Now there are a number of ways of avoiding, so long as it's not the only intention behind doing that, these types of care fees. I mean, some people consider, I get clients in the office come in regularly who say, how do I avoid this? And my first answer to that is, well, actually it's illegal for you to try to avoid it.
Illegal, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things is, if you are trying to move away your assets so that you cannot allow the council to take money off you by, say, for example, transferring your home to your children. That's the first thing I get told in the office, or asked in the office. Can I transfer my property to my children? Well, you can't transfer property to the children and get away with it, because there is regulations or law that says that if you try to deprive yourself of assets, for example, overspend, transfer property, sell jewelry at low value, give money away, all of those things will be considered as asset deprivation if the sole intention or the major intention for that was to prevent you having to pay fees to the council for your own care.
So if the council thinks that you've done it deliberately to try and avoid care costs.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. The other aspect of it is, obviously, if you were to get rid of many of your assets, which are, shall we say, things that you are reliant upon. You kept it for a rainy day. Your own home, for example, you give it to a third party, even if it's your child, things might change. Your child might get married. Your children might predecease you, and your grandchildren might take care, or your children's beneficiaries, who you may not be related to, might get the benefit of the property. You may need to leave the property. That is not a good idea. A lot of people think, okay, I trust my kids. It's not a case of how you trust your kids. It's a case of who is going to ultimately have the benefit of your property or your assets that you are depriving yourself of. So there's two aspects to this. One is that by depriving yourself of assets for the sole intention of avoiding care fees, you will also at the same time potentially lose the asset as well. So there's two issues there.
It has to be done very carefully.
It has to be done very carefully with legal advice.
Can I just come back a little bit? I mean, you said it when you started that obviously within the Muslim community, this is an issue that, I don't think many people have considered it.
Yeah.
How big a problem do you think it is? Because most people like to own their own homes, don't they?
Yes.
Right?
I think, shall we say, our community has become harmonized with the English culture. And you might say that's fortunate or unfortunate. There are definitely fortunate things about it, but there are also unfortunate things about it. One of the things is that the culture here in this country is that children move away. And then when parents are being looked after, if they become too difficult to look after, then you decide not to look after them, but take them to a care home, or have them cared for in their own home. Which is
happening more and more, unfortunately.
It is happening more and more. I can give you an example from my own personal experience. It was incredibly difficult. My father passed away 5 or 6 years ago. He had dementia. And towards the last few years, I looked after him. In fact, the last year I looked after him, and he ended up dying in Dewsbury Hospital, and he was from Leicester. Unfortunately, my own brothers and sisters, struggled for 6 or 7 years to look after him. And in the end, it was necessary for me to intervene and look after him. I fortunately had the time and the will and determination to do it. But I look back at it. I look back at it and I say to my own son, only just recently I told him, I said, son, the main thing is that if I am so bad like I was, if I become so bad that I'm like your grandfather, please, please, please put me in a home and get professional care, or at least get some respite once or twice a week, so that you are able to look after me with ease. So all I ask is that even if I can't tell who you are or where you're from, at least you come and see me on a daily basis or at least a few times a week. That's all I've asked, and that's because it's come from my own experience. And that's the harmonization of culture that I feel as if that's something important. I'll need to give my children the independence to be able to do that. He always responds because he saw me bathing my father, taking him to the toilet and looking after him, that he remembers how I did that.
The effort you put.
Yeah, the effort that I made. But I think that is a difficult thing to do. It's not easy.
You see, and I think one of the challenges, and one day I'll be talking about this because at the moment there's some initiative taking place, where in the old days, you know, we used to have daughter-in-laws coming from India, Pakistan. They used to stay in the house and look after the parents. We now have boys and girls getting married in this country. Both of them are professionals. Both of them have got jobs. So the elderly parents are being left at home while the husband and wife go out to work, which in the current economic climate, they have to work, unfortunately, whether you like it or not. And therefore the elderly people are being left behind, sometimes very lonely for the whole day. And I know you've heard some horrendous stories about how some people are being neglected, not because they want to neglect them, because they don't have a choice in some cases. And therefore this is an issue that is going to be affecting our community as we move forward. And one of the initiatives that I've been working on for the last 3 years with my local authority is establishing a Muslim care home where all the Islamic sort of, substance is provided in terms of prayer facilities, halal food, wuzu khana and things like that. So, that is something that we'll come back to. But I mean, that your example is very, you actually we looked after our mum as well. So I used to, sleep every second weekend, 3 nights there looking after my mum. My brothers used to come there and my sisters used to come. They lived away from here and they used to come for, weeks looking after my mum. So it gave us respite. It was absolutely vital. But I mean, in terms of, again, in the situation where your dad could not maybe make decisions for himself, right? I mean, this is something else that I want to touch about, and that is this thing called the, the LPA, or the living power of attorney, for somebody else to take control of decision making. I mean, that is something that I suspect not many people would have thought about. What are the issues? I mean, what are the issues around that?
Well, lasting powers of attorney is one of the things that you can do, is basically give somebody, one of your loved ones or someone that you trust, a power to be able to do things on your behalf in 2 ways. One is to give a health and welfare power of attorney. Another is to give a financial and property power of attorney.
Do they have to be 2 separate powers?
They have to be 2 separate power of attorney. If you don't do that whilst you have the ability to make decisions, and the ability to make decisions is decided upon by a qualified doctor, if there is any doubt about it, then you will be faced with the court of protection making decisions for you.
So you put that in somebody else's hands.
Yeah, so you take, for example, mother and father have got money, joint money, and everything is in the father's account, for example, because that happens quite often where it's in one spouse's account. And if you have that situation, then even taking out money to pay the electricity bill, you will have to go to the court of protection to get permission to pay the electricity bill. And that will cost money every time it happens.
So if the husband dies and the wife survives...
No, if the husband has dementia, you're talking about.
Oh, sorry, dementia. He becomes
if the husband has dementia...
No capacity, sorry.
No capacity.
No capacity,
then you will find that the court of protection will get involved. You've got expensive fees, legal fees, and the court of protection fees. So if you have...
So the spouse, the wife cannot make the decision.
She can't.
Right.
So it is important that powers of attorney are given to at least each other whilst they're alive. So if there is dementia, then at least there is the power to control finance and welfare. But there's also power to control decisions about hospital.
Yeah, treatment. And
treatment.
Yeah.
For example, you might not want to have a resuscitation when someone has had a cardiac arrest or is no longer breathing. You might decide that you do not want that person that has died, technically, to be resuscitated, because the consequences of them losing consciousness or if they've stopped breathing, the consequences of that is quite severe afterwards, after they've been resuscitated. They may not be the same person again. And you often ask that question, and the individuals ask that question, but without a power of attorney, only the individual can make the decision, and then the doctors make the decision on behalf of the individual. They don't allow next of kin always to make the decision.
Including the spouse.
Including the spouse. Yeah. So it's really, really important to have those types of powers of attorney. I mean, we've sort of gone on from the previous the care thing and the powers of attorney. I mean, I'd like to turn back to the power to the care.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important for the care issue that we've been talking about, that you can take steps to avoid. There's some simple steps, first of all. The simple step is not just to transfer the property, because that can be disastrous, like I've explained before.
Right.
The first thing you can do is obviously agree a deferred payment with the council, which I think you suggested previously what happened with your mother. So your deferred payment, you can agree that, and they will not sell the home.
For the audience, for my viewers, deferred payment. Can you just explain what deferred payment is?
Yeah, so what happens is the council negotiates with you how much the care costs are going to be. They don't take any money off you, but they put a legal charge over your property or your parents' property or whoever the loved one is, their property, and tells them, allows them to live in the property, tells them they can live in the property. But when they die, then the property can be sold. So it's a bit of an own goal, but at least they can live in their own home, or their own home can still stay.
And receive the care as well.
Yeah, and receive the care.
Right.
Another option is to, if they move into a care home, is to rent the house and potentially be able to raise enough income, depending on the type of house. We're looking at care fees anywhere between £27,000 and £40,000 a year.
Wow.
So it's very rare that you can raise that amount of income.
Yes,
but you can possibly in places like London, potentially. So it's very rare that you can raise that sort of income. But if you are able to do that, then that's a potential. It may be that you've got some savings and the income that you get from the rent actually helps you. So that's another option. Another item which is possible, and this is probably from a point of view of what your Islamic view is on this, is something similar to a life policy or a life annuity.
Right. You
know, when people retire, they often buy an annuity for a cash sum, and the insurance company takes a risk on how long you're going to live. Well, in this particular case, the insurance company takes a risk on how long or whether or not you'll ever need care, and how much your care fees are going to be. Okay? So in that case, you buy what is called a care annuity. They're quite expensive products. It's worthwhile considering, but you have to do it at an early stage rather than do it at a later stage, because if you are ill already, you're not able to look after yourself, there's no way you're going to get an annuity because it's going to be claimed upon.
So you've already got a condition. A lot of insurance companies would deny you that. I mean, obviously,
all of the insurance companies would deny you if you've already got a condition.
You've got a precondition. I hope so far you've found what we've been talking about. And Asif, what you're telling us is really absolutely fundamental and important information. Don't go away, because we'll be talking about this in more detail in part 2 of this program. I know many people think, Marisa, it's not going to happen to me, but you'd be surprised how many young people nowadays find themselves in a situation where they lose, their physical well-being and sometimes even mental well-being, and they are affected with either care cost issues or dementia issues, Alzheimer's, and their assets and whatever they have are sometimes tied down because they have not put in place some of the things that Asif talked about. I hope you found this interesting, and we'll come back to this very soon. Take care. In the meantime, as I say, have a break, have a tea, coffee, or faluda, whatever is your wish, and we'll come back to you soon. In the meantime, may Allah bless you, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.